Ed, would you like to introduce our organization?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Ed Bixby here from the Global Green Burial Alliance with my co-host Gretchen Spletzer. We would love to welcome our forum guests tonight about Reef Ball Memorialization, George Frankel of Eternal Reefs, Todd Barber of the Reef Ball Foundation, and Laura Boehm of Memorial Reefs International. And please, everyone who is participating today, if you haven't taken the pledge, go to the website, become a GGBA either provider or consumer pledge member, and really looking forward to this conversation with these gentlemen to find out more about reef balls and the purpose they serve and all that good stuff. So Gretchen?
Yes. So I'm Gretchen Spletzer, and I'm hosting this forum with you guys on the using reef balls for more memorializations, which is using cremains to create these reef balls. But first we're going to have Rachel Bernhardt, who is with the Alaska Natural Burial Project, to tell us about her project and what's going on up in Alaska with natural burial. So here's Rachel's bio. Rachel Bernhardt is a lifelong Alaskan and came to death care after a decade in organ and tissue donation. She has become obsessed with expanding access to death care infrastructure and believes people should be empowered in choosing whatever final dispositions they find personally meaningful. She is a founding member of the Alaska End of Life Alliance, which focuses on education, advocacy, and support for families and professionals. Other current projects include establishing a conservation burial ground, which is Alaska Natural Burial, and opening the first alkaline hydrolysis facility in South Central Alaska, which is Flameless Cremation. So we're really happy to have Rachel here and learn more about what she's doing up there, because I just happened to stumble upon her on Facebook and was really intrigued. So Rachel, I'll let you take over.
Thanks. I'm trying to figure out how to share my screens because I have a couple of pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's do that one. Share. Can we see the beginning of the slideshow here?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so oh yeah, I was gonna disclaimer. We got like a foot of snow last night, so I'm at home still with a baby and dogs, so I'm gonna do my best to keep background noise down. But disclaimer issued. So my name is Rachel. I am a lifelong Alaskan, born and raised in Anchorage, and I'm a little bit newer to the death care industry. It's kind of become a passion in the past less than 5 years. But I have 3 projects going on right now. Like you mentioned, Alaska Natural Burial, the Alaska End of Life Alliance, and Flameless Cremation Services. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about all of them. So that's me, and that's my baby. That's just this last fall. I know, right?
Yeah.
So my journey from healthcare to death care, I spent about a decade working in organ and tissue donation. So I was witnessing families grapple with end of life decisions kind of at the same time we were having these conversations about donation, interfacing with funeral homes on a pretty much daily basis, and learning for myself how much of an honor it was to physically care for the deceased with my own 2 hands. So those were kind of my experiences over the past decade or so, leading into experiencing a couple of personal losses in my own life, my grandma, and then my dog, kind of one right after the other. And then working with the funeral professionals as a consumer instead of a professional, I assumed going into that interaction that I knew what to expect and what I would feel. And I kind of walked away from both of those situations feeling really confused and feeling like something really big was missing. Like something was missing. So I had missed out on something, and I couldn't really put my finger on it. So it launched me down this rabbit hole. I started learning everything I could about green burial, conservation burial grounds, water cremation, natural organic reduction. Walt was actually a really big part of my kind of origin story too. He was very freely giving of information and sharing what he was doing down at Herland. So learning more about DIY death care and home funerals, starting to meet. We have a handful of death doulas and midwives up here. I had no idea what that was. Learning about cultural variations in death care. And I kind of came to the conclusion that people should really have access to what they find meaningful. I can't tell you what that is. You can only know that for yourself. And that the local infrastructure here, what we have access to up here, really needed a makeover, big time. So kind of the logistics also are a little bit different up here. So I wanted to share that really briefly. So Alaska is a huge state. Most of our population is centered in Anchorage, where I am at. Our next most populous city, Fairbanks and Juneau, only have about 30,000 people in them. A big part of the Alaska population isn't even on a road system. They certainly don't have access to a funeral home at all. So this is the kind of geography that I'm dealing with, and then the size of it. I think we're always like this tiny little state right next to Hawaii, right? We're pretty big. So kind of starting to think about how do I begin to transform what's available here and create the most impact for the most people. I am kind of focusing my efforts in Anchorage right now, and the first project I started was Alaska Natural Burial. So I established a nonprofit and identified a parcel of land. We're still in the land acquisition process. The parcel of land that we're looking on, this is a critical wetland habitat in the foreground, and where it turns into forest and starts going uphill is where our parcel is. It's about 10 acres on this little hillside. It's currently owned by the municipality, but we found in the municipal code here that because we're a nonprofit, if we meet a whole bunch of requirements, they're allowed to dispose of this property to a nonprofit at less than fair market value, which they can donate it to our organization because we're serving a municipal need. So this is the longest, most drawn out process, but we think it's worth it to not have to come up with that capital up front and try to buy a huge parcel of land outright. So that's what we're working on. The conservation value of this parcel, this is a horrible image and I am sorry. It's a pretty impressive piece of land here. It's surrounded by about 350 acres of what is going to become community forest forever. There's a local land trust that has just started that project, and we're right in between Potter Marsh, this critical wetland habitat, and the Chugach Mountains. So this is prime real estate for our large mammals to be traversing between the summer and winter months. So it's important that that stay open forever for them to continue to do that. Some views, some springtime views from the parcel, looking over Cook Inlet and seeing the mountains. I know, right? It's perfect. Yeah. And another one looking back up the hills at the Chugach Mountains in the background. And then some winter shots. It's lightly used currently by neighborhood area residents. It's a social trail, and then there's some wildlife footprints going through there. So, and then one more.
Wow, yeah. It's really, really wild looking.
It's been awesome to see it change with the seasons, and then when the snow comes out, it's you can really see what animals are using it. So that's really cool. We had a landscape architect volunteer a little bit of time to draw us a concept render. So all of the existing trails, these are all existing trails. Her and I just turned a tracker on and walked through all of the existing trails that we could find. And this is them. So we kind of put, maybe this is where our parking lot's going to be. Maybe this is where a little welcome structure can be. And this is kind of our concept render that we're going off of for right now. This is our board of directors meeting at a coffee shop here.
Wow.
So that's a work in progress, like I said. My other project that I'm working on is Flameless Cremation Services. This one is coming together a little quicker. This is going to be the first alkaline hydrolysis facility in South Central Anchorage. So the equipment that we're working with is the PET 550. So we're going to start with animals. We are fortunate here that local code doesn't specifically define cremation as meaning flame cremation. So we're going with a broader, accepted definition of that, and we're going to start with animals, and we're just going to start. So
Yeah.
I had a lawyer tell me if they don't specifically prohibit it, then that means it's okay. So that's what we're going on. But eventually we do hope to expand this business to include water cremation for people, and then start getting into natural organic reduction here.
Oh,
And then the last organization that I'm a part of is kind of my catch-all for everything else that doesn't fit neatly into these other businesses. So neatly into Alaska Natural Burial or the water cremation, and it's the Alaska End of Life Alliance. So we're primarily working on education, advocacy, and support for both people and professionals. Okay. And let's see. We have a really diverse board for this organization. We roped in a couple of the death doulas locally. We have a cultural anthropologist who's done a lot of work in our Alaska Native rural communities, and some palliative care nurses. And it's a newer organization, so we've been doing that one for about a year. We've generated a pretty good resource directory that's really specific to Anchorage area. Let's see. I'm so sorry.
wow, you've been really busy and done a lot of stuff, I can see.
It's been a busy
Yeah.
couple of years. Yeah, we're doing death cafes and advanced care planning workshops. We say yes to every opportunity to speak, whether it's media or at a professional conference. Let's see.
Yeah.
And we've been liaising for some interagency collaborations and some research projects that are pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, and so how is this being received by the people, of Anchorage, or, do you get a lot of interest in it?
We
I would think
do,
you
and
would.
yeah, we do, and it's bringing a lot of people out of the woodwork saying, we've been
That
getting
were
a lot of,
alone.
yeah, they
before.
were alone before and didn't know.
Yeah.
We don't even know. I didn't know that there was a solution to this problem. I didn't know that somebody wanted to talk to me about this. I just learned about death doulas, and man, I really want to be one. How do I do that? So just kind of trying to answer all those questions for people. We're having a strategic planning session next month to kind of talk about what we're going to be doing in 2024. One of our primary things that we're kind of looking into is a lack of access to hospice services. Even communities that are 30 minutes outside of Anchorage, that's too far for our hospices to deliver services to. So we have people that are just a half hour out of town that don't have access to people who want to be at home, who want to die at home, whose families want to support that. They just don't. So we're starting to explore models of community death collectives, community death care. What would it look like to have a volunteer hospice that serves this? So kind of looking at what those solutions might look like. Yeah. Again, you learning new stuff all the time. Community death collective. I never, of course, like it's so obvious.
Yeah, I think I saw on social media in Australia, there was a community death collective where they care for community members or something. I'll have to find that point.
I would love, again, everybody in this community, this whole green burial, all of it, community is so forthcoming with information and freely sharing of what works here, what doesn't work here, how can that work where you are. It's been great.
Yeah, Tamsin from Australia just chimed in. It's Tender Funerals. Check them out on Facebook because they show some pictures of, kind of what a community funeral can look like.
That's great.
Thanks, Tamsin. I can't see you right now, but thank you.
Well, Rachel, we really appreciate everything that you've brought to us today here at the GTDA. It's fascinating. Kudos to you for helping lead the way in Anchorage. And if there's anything that we can do here through our network, certainly we're here to help you and your community as well. So thank you very much, Rachel. We do appreciate everything you've told us today.
Yeah, I loved learning about that. Thank you. Okay, so I will introduce the rest of our guests here on the Reef Balls. I'm gonna introduce Todd first because I'm probably gonna ask him to speak first. So Todd Barber is the founder and charter member of the Reef Ball Foundation, as well as a recognized expert in design, reefs and their applications. Robust business, computer, and marine sciences that aided him in the management of a network of nonprofits, contractors, and partners, leading in worldwide efforts to rehabilitate ocean ecosystems. And we also have with us George Frankel. He is the CEO of Eternal Reefs. Eternal Reefs specializes in the creation of living memorial reefs that include the cremated remains of people and their pets. Frankel works with families hands-on program that has them casting their loved ones memorial. He does great work with families and helps to preserve, protect, and enhance the marine environment. And then we also have Laura Burkhoff. Steve Burkhoff is her husband, and together they are the owners of Memorial Reefs International. Memorial Reefs International helps families, the community, and the environment by building artificial reefs using cremated remains. These reefs are designed to enhance coral generation and marine biomass. Currently, Memorial Reefs International has 6 different locations ranging from Ocean City, New Jersey to Venice, Italy. So we have some great folks to talk. So I wanted to start with Todd, and just Todd, if you could explain what goes into making the Memorial Reef Ball. I saw something about the pH, and I guess the pH is probably the ideal pH for the creatures to latch onto the reef ball.
Yeah, I guess I should probably start from the beginning. I know that Laura and George are going to give you a lot of information specific to reef balls and memorialization. But we started 30 years ago, basically building purpose-built reefs around the world. We've built 2 million modules in 88 countries, almost everywhere you can imagine, including Alaska, Rachel. We've got reef balls up there as well. And so we were passionate about creating habitat in the ocean. And that was coral reefs, kelp reefs, oyster reefs, anywhere that there was a reef, kind of like what everybody else is doing on land with forests. We were doing it underwater. That spread when Eternal Reefs, we had one of our board members, his father-in-law died. And he said, I want to be put in one of those reef balls. And we were kind of sort of aghast. And like Rachel, we knew nothing about the memorial business or anything like that. And so he said, well, just let me see if I can figure out how to do that. And much like Rachel, Don Brawley, looked all over Atlanta and figured out the rules and figured out this could be done. And started doing this, and then had other people ask him to do this kind of thing. But Don was young and wasn't really ready to start a full business just yet. So George stepped in and partnered with Don and turned this into a business where we could expand this to other people. And so the Reef Ball Foundation that I'm a member of, we're not directly involved with that. We spun them off as different companies. We license them to do this kind of thing, because we're out there training people how to build reefs and how to make those better. So over the years, as we get better at planting corals and adapting these things to different environments and different locations, then the Memorial Reef people can then choose the best of the best technologies. Because if you think about it, we might be doing stuff cutting edge, and might be trying an experiment, for example. You don't want to experiment with grandpa. So what we do is, we pass on to the memorial industry the techniques that'll make a reef ball last more than 500 years in a very, very stable place where it's not going to get hurt by a hurricane. So it's sort of the best possible reef. And they feed back to us, taking into needs of what people need. So when you ask about those things like the pH and stuff, first that was really important for us, because we're planting coral reefs. They're going to last for more than 500 years. But it became even more important for George and Steve and Laura, because they needed to be able to go to their clients and say, hey, we're going to give you a permanent resting place, but it's not going to take up living space from other people. We had a lot of our projects are on Caribbean islands, for example, or islands around the world. Well, when you put gravestones in place, you can't build there anymore. Well, that's great if you live in Alaska and you got a lot of open area that you want to keep open for the wildlife. But it's terrible in a little small island when you've only got so much beachfront, and all of a sudden, over the years, you start to run out of land, and nobody can build anything anymore, and people get crammed into smaller spaces. So going to the ocean made sense. It's the same sort of thing. We know we want those fish to be roaming like we want the elk to be roaming freely for a long period of time. And we know they need the reefs just like you need trees. So it just sort of made sense. I am going to put a little quick link up here in the chat. And this is to the World Mapping System. And I do want to share, let's see if I can share my screen here. If I can do the window.
Well, you guys do reefs for like shore break and all kinds of other things besides memorial reefs, right?
We do. And
Yeah.
if this, I don't know if this is going to let us share this or not here. Here we go, Chrome tab. So this is like a worldwide map. And you can go anywhere in the world with this link and see exactly what we've done and where we've done it. So I don't know what we've done in Alaska. So let's zoom in on Alaska.
Yeah.
You can see we've got some partners up here in Alaska. And so this will be Alaska Marine Lines. And if we look around, we can probably find some places that actually have reef balls. Here we go.
Wow.
And this would be a study that was done in coastal waters.
Uh-huh.
Trying to find it here. I know we've got somewhere.
Wow, you do have a lot though all around the world, huh?
There we go, Whitaker. There we go. There's where the reef balls are. So you find the reef balls, and then you click on the reef ball, and then you can actually go in and look at photos of the reef balls. So if I wanted to click on the photos and I want to see what the reef balls in Alaska look like, there's an underwater reef ball. And there's some fish growing on it. And that's just, a random location. And you guys can zoom in anywhere you are, anywhere in the world. But what's kind of cool with for George's business, we'll take Eternal Reefs here and we'll go back to Florida. And we keep this very up to date. You can actually go in and look at the Memorial Reefs that we've built. Yeah. And you can see the Memorial Reefs will have a memorial plaque on them, which is one of the things that they do. Let's go into.
Wow. So do the people who have a relative out there in one of those reefs, I'm sure they have access, obviously, to all of this, right? To look at.
Yeah, and in fact, this is online, so you can go down to an individual ball and see the coordinates of the ball. Oftentimes, you can find the people's names, what size balls they are, as much information as you want to get. And we release only the public information. So like here, we've got Ruth and Jim, and we're put down in 218. Sometimes there was a lot more balls put down, so some of the people didn't want to have their names out there. It's only the public information we put up there, but certainly a family could go out and take their boat and navigate to these coordinates and find the reef balls, and share their experience as much as or as little as they want to share. It could be news articles, all kind of different information.
Todd, if I could ask you a question, and I think that the audience would really be interested in this. What's intrigued me about it is, the carbon offset from these reef structures, as a carbon sink. Could you explain a little bit about that? Because I think that's what people would find very interesting.
Yeah, we do a lot with carbon sequestration, and there's different types of carbon sinks when it comes to reef balls. You've got oysters that sequester carbon in a really, really big way. So when we put reef balls down in temperate clients, there's a lot of conversion. Basically, when you're creating an oyster shell, that's all calcium carbonate that's coming out of the atmosphere, and then it's becoming a rock, and it's coming into the sedimentation. Same sort of thing with coral reefs. They're not quite as fast growing as oyster reefs, right? So they take a little bit longer, but they also are, keep growing over years like big trees and sequester more and more carbon. And then you get other things like cold water reefs, like the Alaskan reef we just looked at. Then it's growing seaweed, some shellfish, different types of things that get into the ocean chain, and it's more like a breathing tree. Not every single bit of that carbon gets sequestered in the dirt. Sometimes it gets back into the food chain and other places. So you have to look at where you're putting the reef ball to determine the exact amount of sequestration you're happening. Just kind of like when you plant a tree. You could plant a fast growing tree or a slow growing tree, and it might be in a location where it's going to petrify and be permanent, or it might be in a pasture where it's going to be eaten by animals and recycled a little bit. But it definitely works. So that's a big, big part of it. And of course, we know that reef balls are going to continue to create life. Every reef ball makes about 400 pounds of marine biomass every year. So that's fish and plants and corals and oysters. About 30% of that are things that people eat. And the other 70% are things that live and are, out in the wild, things like jellyfish and stuff that we may or may not eat, that kind of thing. But it's really kind of cool that you're actually giving something back, and you're going to be giving something back permanently. And as you continue to grow, it's even more. It's kind of like the concept of planting yourself as fertilizer for a tree. You become a living tree, you get back into nature, you're giving back. And I really believe what Rachel said is really, really important. People ought to have the options to choose what's most dignified and what they think is right for them. So if you have a connection with, camping in the mountains, you might want to choose, planting a tree in the mountains. If you are a fisherman or a coral reef lover or a surfer and you want to be near the water, then reef balls is your option for those kind of things. Everything needs to, if you want to go into space, you should be able to be shot into space. And, anything that makes sense to that particular person. I've, over the years heard so many stories from people that have done this that it just makes me happy to know that people are, at peace when they find this. And I'll let Laura and George sort of continue more on that, because they really have that experience about dealing with the families, which is not something I get the chance to do a lot of because I'm out there doing the reefs. But I love what you guys are doing, and I'm going to be in a reef ball. I've had friends of mine be in a reef ball, family. I've even put my pets in reef balls. So I think it's really cool, and it's been a very positive experience for me when I'm involved in it on those other sides as well.
Well, thank you, Todd. Absolutely, that was a great description. As far as what the impact can be on the environment. So I think that's very, very helpful to our listeners.
Yeah. It sounds like they do a whole lot of good.
We have actually built 0.5% of all the reefs that have been destroyed in my lifetime at the Reef Ball Foundation. So it's one of the few things that people can do that's truly positive. 0.5% doesn't seem like a lot, but that means if there was 200 companies doing what I'm doing, we would be keeping up with the destruction of our coral reefs. And you know how big that is in the news today. Right. And that's not that big of a stretch, right? And we grow in size every year. We pretty much doubled in size every year. So we would probably be catching up a lot more of that if we weren't destroying the reefs faster and faster. As I've gotten older, sort of global warming has caught up with some of our reefs, and we're losing them a little bit faster than we had hoped. But still, it's a positive thing. So instead of us having to worry about all the negative things that humans do, this is a chance to be something positive. And I think that's really important message when it comes to memorialization, that people need to leave with some hope and some happiness in their lives, no matter, how bad things have been.
Absolutely, Todd. And it's a win-win for the environment and a win-win for the families. And most certainly, George, you have a mountain of experience in this with humans. I'm sure you have plenty to share, and Laura will talk a little bit about pet memorialization as well. But George, if you could tell us a little bit about Eternal Reefs and your experiences with the Reef Ball Foundation and Todd and all that, that would be wonderful.
Sure thing. I apologize right up front. I'm on a spare computer. I don't have any pictures that I can post there, so you just get to listen and watch me. But Todd was correct. The founding of this was in 1998. Don Brawley was one of the board members of the Reef Ball Foundation, was working for me in a different business, and came in and asked for time off to do this. At that point in time in my life, I was dealing with, my mother's life was winding down. My brother had just been diagnosed as terminal. My mother was going to be the last person in our family cemetery plot up in New York. Neither my brother nor myself had any interest in going back to New York other than to take care of Mom. And neither of us wanted to be buried. So as soon as Don said it, it made perfect sense to me. And when he came back is when we really started talking about, okay, is this a viable business that we can do? So one of the things that we did on the front end that was really, and it was strategically one of the best moves we've ever made. And that is we made the conscious decision that we identified with the reef building industry, not so much with the funeral industry. Our goal was to use memorialization as the tool to help restore all these reefs. So that's really the genesis, if you will, of where we came from. When we first started out, and everything Rachel said earlier, I sign on to. When we first started out, we were looking at this as a reef building exercise. And so we did not encourage families to come and participate. Well, a lot of you may remember, some of you may not, but I think it was 2001 or 2000, Brent Marsh, the Tri-State Crematorium event happened. This is where the guy was not cremating the remains from a number of funeral homes in the Tennessee, Georgia corner. And it became a huge story. And I'm watching it on the crawler on the TV. And I'm saying, shit, we're up the creek now. I mean, this is going to kill cremation. Get back to the office. Our information requests were going through the roof. And what we came to recognize right away was most people didn't think this was an indictment of the cremation industry. This was one poor bastard who just didn't do what he was paid to do. The other part that came in with a ton of these requests was, how do I know you're going to do what you say you're going to do? So we made the conscious decision at that point to start to actually encourage families to come and start participating in making the reef. And at that point in time, some of you may know from the history of the Green Burial Council, Josie, he was the founder, and the first burial ground in the United States was the Ramsey Creek Preserve in Westminster, South Carolina. Well, Billy and I had worked together. Billy is the founder of the Ramsey Creek Preserve, and Billy and I, years before, had been raft guides for the same rafting company. We were a couple of years apart, but we had the same circle of friends. We just never met. And so one day I'm sitting at the campfire and they're saying, you know, you ought to go talk to Billy Campbell. It sounds like he's doing something similar to what you're doing. So I met Billy. The timing was ideal. I mean, Billy was going in the direction of natural burial. We were starting to go in the direction of seeing about reef memorialization. So we were kind of on the front end of everything. And at one point in time, the GBC had actually had a program by which they were endorsing reef memorialization. As the GBC got bigger and things changed a little bit, they didn't have the resources to keep following these types of cremation memorials. So they kind of backed out of doing that. Well, from this point going forward, I'm kind of going to talk about what it is we face that's different from virtually everybody else. Every single thing that Eternal Reefs does, and certainly what pet memorials do, has to be permitted. And this permit process can be multi-year. And one of the key factors about permits is they expire. And so I can never turn to somebody when they ask me if I can be right next to my husband. I can't guarantee that. I don't know when she's going to pass away. I don't know if that permit is still going to be active or open. Permits can get renewed, but it is a critical limitation that we deal with. So that's right up there on the table. Yeah. The other part of it was we get a fair number of calls from people who decide they want to do what we're doing. And I can tell you with less than a handful of exceptions, every single one of them started out by thinking this was a get-rich-quick scheme. Mm-hmm. And they had no idea about what they were getting into.
I bet.
Laura can back me up on this one, I think. And that is every one of these conversations I ever had with anybody started out with two things I wanted them to understand. Number one, if you don't have access to a permit, all parts of this conversation is just background noise. When you come and you tell me that you've got a permit, now we can have a serious talk about how viable your idea might be. The second thing I tell them is bend over backwards, not to refer to these as underwater cemeteries. And I say that from a number of experiences, but everybody has in their mind's eye, when I'll use a regulator as an example. When you're talking to a regulator and you're trying to get approval to do something like what we're talking about doing, they've got a ton of questions, and it's easier for the regulator to say no because there's no risk in saying no than there is yes. So when you're sitting there and you're trying to explain what you're doing and you use the word cemetery, everybody has an immediate picture in their mind's eye about what a cemetery looks like. We see it with an open hole. We see it with caskets. We see it with headstones. So that's the mindset that they start listening to the rest of the pitch with. I learned quickly that that was not the way to approach those. So I tell folks, do not use the word cemetery. Anything, and I said, listen, every once in a while, you can't help it. You got to, but really bend over backwards to avoid it. So I will tell you that there are probably only 5 organizations that I'm aware of in the country, and 3 of them are local nonprofits that are focused on marine environment. There's only about 5 organizations in the country that I'm aware of that are doing this, and only Pet Memorials and ourselves are doing this in multiple locations. So not only do we run into problems with permits, we have a number of other issues that dictate how we function. One of them is we're seasonal in most areas. Weather, Mother Nature calls the game for us no matter what we're doing. And we are limited by federal regulation as to the types of sea conditions that we're allowed to work in. So it can look like a pool table out there tonight, and tomorrow morning we can't go out. And tomorrow afternoon, it may look like a pool table again. But we have to manage the families. I'm sorry, I should have taken this up a bit bigger. The rest of our program, families come and they help to make the reef. They take ownership of that reef. You can watch it in their faces. They start feeling as though this is the tribute I'm making with my own hands, and it's to my mother or my father or my brother's life. And there's just a real sense of personal involvement. And that was one of the things that Billy and I had talked about, and that is when you lose somebody, and I say this from too many experiences, and you're the one who has to set up the arrangements, you go to the funeral home, you make a handful of decisions, you write a check, and from that point going forward, you are a third person in the back of the room, and the funeral director handles virtually everything else from going forward. In our program, and the same is true with green burial, the families are actually invited to participate. And some of them will throw one shovel of dirt in there. Some people will fill in the hole. It's all a question of how they feel, going back to what Rachel was saying. But at the end of the day, when we're done, we then have the families are done with the casting. They get to personalize the top of the reef with handprints, written messages. We've got sea glass and shells, and they get to decorate the top. On the third day, we have what we call a viewing. The families come. Now, before the pandemic, we averaged about 7 family members per memorial. After the pandemic, we were averaging closer to 12. It has started to subside again, but I have got real limitations as to the number of families and reefs that I can place at any given time. What I mean by that is we've got equipment that has to be relied on in all of these different locations, and the equipment has limitations. So I use everything from towboats to shrimpers, and they have to have enough deck space. They also have to be able to handle the deck load. You know, if I'm going to put 10 of our memorials, the small ones on there, they're looking at 7,500 pounds of deck load. So their boat has to be compatible with that type of a delivery system. These are all small business people. They go out of business like everybody else. Most of my shrimpers, they're out of the business just because they can't compete anymore. But we run into these equipment limitations. And a lot of these people that call and say, this is what we want to do, they don't even begin to recognize this. Another regulation we have to address, and that is the Army Corps, who happens to be God in the permit process for artificial reefs, requires that the reef material that we use has to be 550 pounds or more. So again, the smallest reef that we use is 750 pounds. We go up to 1,500 pounds. And that limits the type of equipment that I can get in each one of the areas that I go to. Then I've got the problem of getting the families out on the reef. Sunday, we have the viewing. If somebody's doing military honors, they get their honors presented then. We give the families children's sidewalk chalk, and they can draw and write all over the reefs. We give them rubbing paper and wax, and they'll take rubbings of the plaques. And a lot of times when you look at the decorations on the top of the reef, you could tell who that person was in real life. I wish I had one of our pictures, because it's got a hammer and a chisel and a plane. And if you don't know this guy was a woodworker, shame on you, kind of a thing. So this really becomes a tribute. Well, on Monday, our plan is to take the reefs out on one boat, the families out on a second boat. We place the reefs one at a time. We announce them so each family can pay particular attention when their loved one's being placed. We now live stream the entire program. And once all the reefs are on the bottom, we move the placement boat off the site. We put the family boat directly over the site. And each family then gets to dedicate the reef to their loved one as they see fit, one family at a time, until we get everybody memorialized. Then we as Eternal Reefs will handle a full memorialization for everybody. We close it by reading a brief passage from John Kennedy's speech, The Sea, and we sound the boat's horn, circle the reef, and head back to the dock. What happens after that is families go home wherever they came from, and they don't talk about, we just went down to Sarasota and buried Mom. What they talk about is, you wouldn't believe what we did this weekend in Sarasota. And after every single project we do, our information requests spike. We've got 24,000 fans on Facebook organically, and we're a memorialization organization. And I invite anybody who's really kind of questioning the value of what we're doing, and I say this from the pet standpoint as well, go to our Facebook page and read some of the comments. If that doesn't convince you, again, there's nothing I'm going to be able to say now that will. So that's pretty much what our story is. We did approach the funeral industry initially, and they largely rejected us almost in total. And at the time, it was more legitimate than I realized. What the issue was is, who the hell is George Frankel, Don Brawley? What the hell are they talking about? What is this reef memorialization? Do you think I'm going to turn my families over to you? So I felt that that was a pretty legitimate position. We then went directly to the consumer, which is really where our business is right now. The other part about dealing with the funeral industry is, because we've got so many regulatory hurdles we have to deal with, and they change from time to time. I just got an email this morning from Miami-Dade County telling me I now have to do something totally different. I don't know if I can meet that requirement. Yes. I thought you was asking a question. I didn't. But I forgot where I was there.
Oh, well, I have a question. So when you put down a reef, you're talking about several reef balls, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then sometimes one ball can have 1, 2, 3, or 4 different cremains inside of it, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
They all have to be ready to go at the same time. There's no way to add them at a future date.
Okay.
Going back to the reef question itself, what happens is, and I'll use Miami as the example, they've got a large reef site called the Girl Scout Reef Site. The Girl Scouts had built some reef balls many years before, and they placed them on this site. So the permit was open, and they invited us to use the site. What they do is, for every one of our projects, I have to report 30 days in advance to them exactly what I'm going to do. They fill out a project manifest. They send it to me with the coordinates that they want me to use, and those coordinates are going to be inside that permitted space. What they do for me, though, is every different project is slightly off from where the previous project was. And so we build what's called a patch reef. We'll have 10 reef balls over here as one reef. We'll have 12 over here as another reef. We'll have 7 over here as a third reef. And the reason why we do that is because most of the creatures that live in the reefs feed on the open sand. So if we were just kind of clustering them all together, it was not going to give enough foraging area for a lot of the creatures. So we deal with all of these things, and recognizing that trying to keep up with one funeral home, let alone a whole network of them, with what just happened on this permit site, this permit's closing, this permit's opening, it's not a reasonable expectation for the funeral, for us to have from the funeral industry.
Yeah.
So we simply have the funeral industry refer people to us,
Mhm.
and if we
Deal
close,
directly with the,
I'm
yeah,
sorry,
you deal directly with families
and we deal
yourselves.
directly with the families. Exactly.
Well, and
That, I'm sorry.
no. We really do appreciate. I mean, you've given us such a detailed picture into what this process is like, and I think that is probably most people don't understand. You are at the mercy of the sea, like you had mentioned, and that these are not easy conditions to be to deal with, and the conditions from some of the agencies are not easily met. So
Yeah.
George, we really appreciate the 25 years that you've given, all the great work, all the happiness and celebration that you've given to these families, and all the good that you've given back to the environment. I mean, it's unforgiving in many ways for the people doing it.
Let me tell one more thing, if I might, and that is that now I just forgot what it was going to be.
Well, I just want to comment that I mean, the whole process sounds, Ed and I, with one of the other people, we did a mini spotlight. We're talking about, it's not grief is not a moment, it's a process. So you working with these families, taking them out on a boat in, the beautiful wild blue yonder, where they're connecting with nature, they have their loved ones going through an experience of honoring them, is so healing for the family. It's not just I guess I just want to say it again, it's not a moment, it's a process.
When they see what these reefs grow into and develop and support, it is an absolute no-brainer from that point going forward. But I do want to say one other thing, and that is what Rachel was saying is very true, and that is there's no one size fits all in any of these programs. And so I am as absolute supportive of conservation burial as I am of reef memorialization. When we first started out, we were the only game in town, and I knew, and our whole team knew, we could not make a single mistake. The easiest thing in the world for a regulator to do is say no, and we had to be as pure as the driven snow, and we've maintained that to this day. We've worked with over 3,000 families, and we have had 2 complaints, both about the weather. So
that's really good.
Great job, George. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Good work.
If anybody has any questions, I'd like to take them now because I got to run.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't see any questions. Does anybody have any before George takes off?
I'm going to send you a link to our 25th anniversary video.
Okay.
And I would love for you to share it with everybody interested.
Oh,
I think you'll find it phenomenal.
Can you put the link in the chat down here right now?
I can't do it now. I can't do it until
yeah. Send it to me and I'll share it on our Facebook too.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
You bet.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So that,
George.
Yeah, so
Thank
Laura,
you.
yeah, I want to hear from Laura too, because I know you guys not only do what George does, but you also are working with veterinarians and the pet industry in creating these reefs with thousands of pet cremains that normally wouldn't have had any kind of honorable burial. So tell us about that.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen too and just start. Let me see. Hold on. I think I need to start it on another page. Okay, that's the wrong page. Sorry. Okay. Can you see it now or no?
It just says Rotten Tomatoes.
Okay, that's not the one. Okay, all right, now I got it. I have a PowerPoint here, so I'm gonna
there you go.
start it.
There it is.
Okay.
Great. Yep, I can see it.
So I'm just gonna Memorial Reefs International and Pet Reefs. And Steve really wanted to be here today, but he's just not quite ready for prime time after his surgery. So I'm gonna say what we need to both say here. And George, the process we're talking about is, involving the families. I'll go a little bit over, some pictures that we're talking about what George was saying as far as involving the families. We've got plaques that they're putting that they're tracing so that they can take those tracings of the plaque home. And
how much does one of like that ball right there, how much would that weigh? Probably.
it weighs, the balls that size weigh between, I believe it's 500 to 750 pounds.
Wow.
In this size of a ball.
Mm-hmm.
And that usually is for one person's cremate. The ones for two, like a couple, would be a bigger ball that would be more in the 1,000 to 1,500 pound range, I believe.
Oh, so they're really heavy.
Yeah. And they're going to stay. That's the thing. They're going to be a permanent resting place. They're going to stay at the bottom of the ocean and grow, marine life for centuries. And so they really are the final resting place and in the ocean, and they really do produce a lot of life in that time that they're there.
Do the so is this like the family? I was just going to ask, do the families mix the cremains in with the cement too?
Yes, and that's what we're doing. The reef ball itself is built prior to the cremains being placed inside them. So you notice that the bottom here is hollow, and so the cremains are actually placed in a separate mold at the bottom of the reef ball. Okay, you can't really see it from here, but it is on the bottom here, and it's in a separate mold, so it's not mixed into the cement in the ball for the memorials for the humans. And this is a picture of the girls mixing some of the cremains in with that small bit of a cement that's going to be put into a mold and then placed in the bottom of that memorial.
Got it.
And then they're decorating the top of it with some shells and some personal personal things, and they have chalk on here and they're drawing things all over the ball. So they do have family participation, as George was saying.
Yeah, that's nice.
This is one of our dedications where the family boat and the reef ball boat was the same in that location. And so there's the decorated reef balls with the families there, and extra flowers to go ahead and place over the site once the reef balls are placed. In some of our locations, most of our locations, we have a separate boat that's a family viewing boat and the deployment boat, but in some areas it's the same. And then this was from Italy, from our dedication in Venice, in the Venetian lagoon. And this lady's husband was memorialized with a reef ball. And then this is in Cozumel. Some of the areas are, so shallow you can just snorkel down to where the reef balls are placed. You don't have to dive or anything. So this was after the memorial is placed. And so we don't have people in the water except for the, our own divers that are placing the balls until after they're placed.
Great pictures.
And then this is our new Pet Reefs site in New Jersey, where we just opened up a facility to accept cremated remains from pets in the Northeast. We have been, our inaugural reef was in Florida off the coast of Sarasota. And I'll show you some of the reef balls that were placed at that. But now we have our New Jersey site as well. And this is close to Ocean City, New Jersey, where the reef will go there. And then this is our initial dedication of reef balls in Florida. These are our pet reefs that they all went down in January of 2022. And at that time, we did have participation of the families. Normally, these are unattended, but the first one we had, our families on board the viewing boat while we deployed the reefs and so forth. So,
so all those ones are ones that have human remains
they
in
don't
them?
have humans. These are all pet ones.
Oh, pet
These
ones.
are all
Okay.
pet.
Oh,
Yeah, and the ones with the plaques, these are the ones that are, have specific pets.
oh, owners, pet owners.
Yeah,
Right.
and then the
Pet
rest
families, we should
just,
say.
the rest of them are just communal cremains that we were sent from the crematory.
That's so great that they're doing that now, I think.
So Laura, could you explain a little bit to the viewers? I know, unlike the human remains, which are set in the jewel, the pet remains are more of a communal, which you just touched on. So the concrete and the way they're created are a little different, isn't that correct?
Yeah, in the pet reefs, the cremains are with replace part of the sand that's in each reef ball. And if however, like the ones here that have the plaques, those cremains are actually put into a separate, what we call the jewel, that goes inside of the reef ball, just as the humans do, so that these are ready to go. When the person says, yes, I want to have my my pet dedicated to the ocean.
And what's most exciting, I think, about this concept is, from my discussions with Steve in the past, it sounds to me like you guys can probably do a fair amount of these, correct? Which would be really impactful to the environment and to the reef systems themselves, correct?
Yes. This represents roughly, I'm going to say 5,000 to 6,000 pet cremains that are within these. And so ordinarily those pets cremains, they might be placed into a pet cemetery. They might be placed into a field. They might be placed into a landfill. There was really no set place that these were being put necessarily. And now they're being used for, growing life in the ocean for eternity.
Yeah.
So much better use of, those, and very much a meaningful honor for those pets.
Yes. And offsetting the cremation that had to happen.
Exactly.
Too,
by exponential amounts.
Yeah.
Right?
And what might interest the guests today too is that, so all the folks know here, reef structures unfortunately aren't permissible in all waters. So we're hoping that someday that they will be. But Laura, if you could touch on that for the consumer, like for instance, I'm pretty sure that here in California at the moment, it's not something that they're allowing it, but of course in New Jersey or Florida they are. How many states are actually allowing it?
It depends. It depends on our permitting. As George says, we have to get a permit to place these in the ocean. And so we tried to get permits in Hawaii and we were not successful. It's very difficult to get permits for anything in Hawaii, where we live. So we went to other places and were able to secure permits in other places so that we could put these memorials down in other parts of the world. We're still hoping that eventually we'll be able to do some in Hawaii. I think it's a matter of as it grows in other places. I believe that there will be a time when it's why aren't we doing it here, and the government will support it. So.
Yeah, because I would think a lot of people in Hawaii would want this kind of disposition,
Yeah, I should point out that reef balls are being put in a lot of places where we can't put cremains yet. Many times governments start out by doing reefs first, seeing how they work, getting comfortable with them before they allow the cremains. Like we are already in California, but we just aren't in California with memorialized options. So usually if we're already there now and they're having a good experience, it will be open in the future. But it's government. Things change slow, and they have to see the success first before they're going to say, okay, yeah, that's working. We're not going to make you pull them out. We like what they're doing. We want more. So watch that as well. Watch where we grow, and you'll see future opportunities for the memorial business as well.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for that, Todd, because that's important to know. So thank you very much. Well,
Yeah, thanks, John.
I think it's been a really enlightening conversation for everybody involved. I mean, most certainly, greener funeral options are most important, all this positive change. So I see, Laura, I don't want to cut you off if you've got more of your slideshow.
Yeah, I do. I just have a couple more slides. Was one of our first memorials was to a horse. So it's not just for dogs and cats.
Yeah.
And especially for cats, because cats eat a lot of fish, it's not just dogs. So, and that's the thing is that, it's any kind of pet, we will memorialize,
That's
so
great.
we'll have a lot of, when people lose their pets, it's really difficult to get closure, I think, for a lot of people, because it's just like, oh, your mom died or your dad died or something, that it's very difficult, and people will give you support, but when your pet dies, it's almost like, oh, you can get another pet, or oh,
no.
isn't that too bad, kind of thing.
Sometimes losing a pet is harder than a human.
It is sometimes harder
Yeah.
than losing a family member. I agree, and so this gives a lot of people some comfort in that space.
Yeah.
It works the other direction too. If you think about it, people sometimes have pets before they have kids because they want to test their ability to be a good parent. The same thing. Sometimes they'll memorialize their pet before they make the choice for themselves as a human or for their grandparents. So it also, the businesses complement each other. It tends to be that same kind of mind think. If you get healing from your pet, you may realize that may work with your father or your mother when they died. So.
Yeah.
And we had our little dog Redford. Steve had a Chiweenie who passed away, and we, that was one of the things behind Pet Reefs is that let's memorialize our pet now and not wait until we die to put a part of his ashes in with him, and see all that life that grows in the time that you're still alive, rather than waiting for years to memorialize your pet and actually do something for the ocean. So it gives people a chance to do something earlier in their lives, not wait until they themselves die or their loved one dies or something like that, so they can memorialize their pets in that way. And then these are our memorials that we placed in Mexico. This is the next after the Florida ones. We had done a bunch in Mexico, and these are all different sizes because these are strictly the communal cremains that are being used in these, and so it's going to areas where they need them most. So there's different sizes and different functions for these different types of reef balls in different places in Mexico. So like I said, we have different sizes, but all of this probably represents, I'm going to say, 20,000 pets at least.
Wow. This might be a question for Todd, but are these reef balls, can they be used to anchor kelp beds and stuff like that too? Yeah.
Yes, we use, if you look on that world mapping system, we do every kind of reef that there is out there, cold water reefs, kelp systems. We have a lot of successful cold water reefs. It's not as much as I think the coral reefs, because you probably just have less interest in a lot of the colder waters for this kind of activity, but they work wonderfully for that. And there's different considerations. Sometimes you need different anchoring systems.
Yeah.
And then this is just, if you have Max, which used to be HBO Max, is now just Max. This documentary is about, is called Alternate Endings, 6 New Ways to Die in America. And if you haven't seen it, our Memorial Reefs is the first section in this. And there's a total of 6 different things that people do, to memorialize people and to celebrate their lives and so forth. So get your Kleenex out and you can watch this and you can see the process kind of all in one place in this. I think it's very helpful if you're interested in Memorial Reefs.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
And
Oh,
then-
well that, yeah.
Any questions or comments or anything? I can show you some nice footage of our reef that had I guess I have to open it.
Like those pictures a lot. It lets people really see, you know, what happens. So it's more of a two-step process. It's the process of getting the cremains into the
Sure, we
ball.
forgot this one. I don't know how we missed this one. This is Timmy, as Todd was saying. He memorialized his little doggy Timmy, and his brother Pancake here is enjoying exploring Timmy's reef ball before it got big.
He's cute.
Yeah, I don't know why it skipped that one, but it skipped it.
This has been a really interesting conversation, you know, one that needed to be had. I don't know that many people realize this is an option, but most certainly it's a good one. There he is. And, you know,
Cute.
Todd, what you're doing, you know, with the Reef Ball Association is wonderful work. George, of course, 25 years of dedication, and Steve and Laura, you know, you've done a wonderful job, and now you're servicing pet parents, which is really a special thing. So we really appreciate you guys participating today. I know that this is going to go a long way, you know, and we here at the Global Green Burial Alliance appreciate the fact that you share your experiences, because these type of educational opportunities are going to, you know, be what leads to change. So
I just want to
really
share this
appreciate it.
last video because it's really meaningful, I think, because
Yeah.
it shows like it shows growth like in 6 months in our pet reef.
Oh,
So there's newer ones here, and then the ones that have grown. Look at all those
yeah.
fish.
and look at all the seaweed on there.
Yeah.
I bet they love it because they can. Oh yeah,
There's a big fish in that one.
I see that. That's so cool.
Some more.
Yeah.
Um,
Really, 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 really interesting.
that's a big fit. That's a shark.
No, it's a grouper, I believe.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That's so cool. I mean, I know probably a lot of people know about this, but a lot of people don't know about it either. So I'm really glad that we can share this. And I would think anybody who lives near the ocean would be interested in this, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do we have any
Even people
questions
who
from the
don't
audience?
live near the ocean but love the ocean and want to visit it all the time? It gives them a good excuse to say, hey, we have to go visit grandma again and go
Yeah.
diving.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Do we have any questions from the audience, Gretchen?
I don't see anything.
Oh, there was a question about, is there anything like this in Australia?
Oh.
I-
Oh yeah.
I
Tamsin's
don't
asking.
know. Todd might be able to answer that one, but I am not aware.
I did answer that in the chat. We do have reef balls in Australia. There was a memorial reef made in Jurien Bay on the Western Australia coast, but we don't have a provider in Australia active right now. So it's an area where we do reef balls, and certainly sometime in the future, somebody might expand there.
Wow, that's good to know. I did cross my mind the Great Barrier Reef, like if you're close to that or.
We're in 88 countries, so there's very, very few places. If you go on that world map, you won't find reef balls near us. Now, that again doesn't necessarily mean there's been memorial reefs, but we do have a lot of people that occasionally do personal private reefs. So you don't necessarily have to do just one reef ball through George or Laura. You can also make a whole reef of 1,000 reef balls and have a memorial reef in your name, but that's now a big community project or sort of a big thing. But we do have people that do that from time to time, either wealthy people, or sometimes it's for a politician, or it can be a famous person from an area. We're doing something right now with Jimmy Buffett. So, I mean, you can have a lot of possibilities of doing larger things as well. And that's also where the Reef Ball Foundation works with the memorial people. Sometimes George will call us up and say, someone's got the special need. they really need to be in this one location. I can't handle them because it's a pretty complex thing. Can one of your regular clients that's building reef balls for other purposes accommodate them? And sometimes we can hook up the client directly with an end user who's building reef balls for other purposes. And if they get along and they like each other, sometimes that can be accommodated. And sometimes on a very private, quiet basis as well.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Well, it's all very promising and interesting. We at the Global Green Burial Alliance want to thank Todd Barber from the Reef Ball Association, George Frankel from Eternal Reefs, Laura Boehm and Steve Burkhoff from Memorial Reefs International. Please visit their sites and learn more about them. Take the pledge if you already haven't. And, folks, I do want to say when there's no questions at the end of a good conversation, it means you've answered all the questions. And that's a good thing, right? So
Yeah.
Thank you again. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Todd. And thank you, George.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
you for
thank you
listening.
very much. And sign the pledge. Go to our website. Bye, everybody.
Bye now.
Bye.